This is my 20th year playing drums. I've been performing professionally for over 15 years, toured overseas and around Australia, played hundreds of gigs, recorded in the studio, and helped many drummers achieve their goals. And along the way, there are a lot of things that I've learned that I wish I knew earlier. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 11 principles that have genuinely changed the way that I play drums to help you make faster progress, get more out of your practice, play better gigs, and ultimately enjoy drums and music. Let's dive in. Okay, so the first one is apply what you practice. So this was a huge one for me because I feel like it's a common thing that many drummers go through. When we start off, we learn our rudiments, we play our drumming books, learn songs, we're learning our technique and getting the facility down. And obviously that's really important. But a common problem is you work on all these things in the practice room, and then when you play a gig or performance, they just don't seem to come out, right? I feel that a big part of that is that that's because we don't practice applying what we've learned. So I'll give you an example. Let's just take a paradiddle. You'd probably start off by playing it on the practice pad or on the snare drum, then add in the click, work it up. Let's say you can play the paradiddle at 150 beats per minute, and that's great. Usually we stop there. And then on gigs, say, why do we even learn this paradiddle? Because I'm not using it, right? There's infinite possibilities and ways that you could use a paradiddle around the drums. Some that come to mind immediately for me are, well, what happens if I replace one of those notes with a kick? You could play a paradiddle in a groove. You could play it in triplets, or you could play it in 16ths. There's so many ways that you can play a paradiddle. And I think it's really important, and this is a crucial step that often we miss, which is, now that I've learnt this drumming idea, now can I actually apply it onto the drums and make music with it? All right, the next point is always be prepared. So if you want to be a gigging musician and you want to do this to earn money, whether that's part-time, casually, or full-time, you need to make sure that you are prepared and you're a reliable musician to hire. So when people are booking bands, they're not always thinking, who are the best musicians I can ask? They're also considering, is this musician a good hang? And are they going to learn the music and show up on time? And often people will choose a slightly less experienced musician that will nail the rep, always show up on time and be a good hang, than someone who is an incredible musician but may not do one or all of those three. And so when you get an opportunity, the best way that you can earn their trust quickly is to be prepared. And then often people will be impressed, and also they feel respected, right? Because you've put in the time and effort to learn their repertoire to make this musical performance good. So it shows that you care, and it shows that you also value their time. So whenever I get asked to do a gig and I get sent the repertoire, whether that's charts or sometimes it'll just be a list of songs, I'll always spend time before I do the rehearsal just prepping notes. So writing out the grooves, writing out the BPMs, writing out any hits or highlighting any sections that I need to watch out for. And then this just means that when you go into the rehearsal, everything runs smoothly, it's efficient, and also if you do a good job, people will ask you back again and again. And not to mention, if you do a good job, then the people that you've just worked with will recommend you to other bands and musicians who say, hey, do you know any good drummers? Then if your name's coming up on that list, then you start to get more and more gigs, and then you make sure you're prepared for those, and then before you know it, you're getting asked to do loads and loads of gigs. All right, number 3 is progress slows but never stops. So when you first start out drums, if you're going from an absolute beginner, like you've never picked up the drumsticks, and you play drums for, say, 6 months, the amount of progress, if you're practicing regularly and you have a good teacher, that you're going to gain in that period of time is going to be infinitely a crazy amount of progress, right? Let's say a beginner, in 1 hour of time, you can go from not holding the drumsticks to being able to play a rock beat at a medium to slow tempo. That obviously is going to be a huge tangible amount of progress. If you've been playing drums for 100 hours and then you learn one triplet drum fill, that might be one fill out of 50 fills that you know. So adding in that one fill isn't going to seem like as much of a huge jump or noticeable tangible improvement. But know that progress is still happening. And, you know, at the end of the day, music is a lifelong pursuit. And if you're playing drums for a long time, the longer you've been playing, the more micro or incremental the progress will seem. That's why, you know, it's important to sort of record yourself every so often so that you can look back 2 years ago and watch yourself play drums and say, wow, okay, there's a big difference between that. But then when you practice the next day after that gig, if you compared those two, there'd be almost no visible difference. And this is why also using a practice journal can be great, because you can look back months ago and go, oh wow, I've actually increased this speed by this much, or I now know these ideas, or I can play this drum solo when I couldn't, just to sort of keep you motivated along the way so that, you know, you don't get disheartened and think you're not improving, because it's very, very likely that you are. It's just harder to see. So progress slows, but it's still there. Speaking of motivation, the next point is action creates motivation. A common myth is that you need to be motivated first to then do an action, right? So I want to feel motivated or inspired to practice, and then I'll go and practice. And an example of that could be that you see an amazing performance, one of your idols playing drums or whatever instrument it is, and then you feel so inspired, you're like, music is amazing, I'm gonna go practice. And that is awesome and very special. And I still get those experiences, and when you do, cash in on them. But motivation isn't always a consistent source. And so action can actually create motivation. So an example could be you don't feel like practicing or you're not feeling inspired, therefore you can either choose to not practice or you can go and practice. Now, if you choose to practice, you're now committing the action of going to practice without the motivation or inspiration. Then when you're in the practice room, let's say that you decide, okay, I'm going to program in some fun drum solo hits to play over, and then you play over them and you go, wow, this is actually so much fun. Now you're feeling motivated and inspired from the action you just took. Now, obviously, you don't want to force yourself to practice to the point of burnout. It's definitely important to have a healthy life balance and to have rest days. But, more often than not, if you just go, all right, I'll just go and do 5 minutes of a drum solo, then that can often spark a bit of motivation or inspiration, which you can then use and carry out throughout the week. And the next day you might go, oh, I really want to go and practice that drum solo. And you've created that the day before by going to practice. So action creates motivation. Okay, so next we have be flexible in the music. So this is an interesting one. I think it is important at times to change what you're doing to make the music better, even if what you were doing was right in the first place. So an example of this could be if you're playing a song in a band. So whoever's playing the melody, they have the strongest musical idea. And let's say the song goes verse, pre-chorus, chorus. Now, let's say you play the verse and then whoever's playing the melody forgets the pre-chorus and skips to the chorus. Now you have a choice here, and the whole band has a choice. You can all either power on and play the pre-chorus, and then you're going to get this rub of it could be different chords and a different melody, and it might not sound great. Or you can all just go, yep, all right, we're going with the melody and we're going to go to the chorus and all be together. And I personally think it's always better to be unified as a band and ensemble and always be together, because the music's going to sound the best that way, than to be right and have a fight in the music. When you're playing with experienced musicians, it's unlikely that these things might happen. But if you do plenty of gigs, there are going to be scenarios where this might happen. And, obviously we're all human. People might forget things, because at the end of the day, we're playing music to share an experience, excitement, emotion with an audience or with the listeners. And really, it's a language and a form of communication. And, it's totally cool after the gig to say, hey, can I just check? I think it was supposed to go verse, pre-chorus, chorus. And sometimes just sort of saying that to the band afterwards and having a constructive chat together can be really beneficial. And someone might just say, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, that was my bad. I completely forgot. And yeah, of course, it's the pre-chorus. Thank you. And now you've actually developed more trust and you're all on the same page, which is going to always create the best musical outcome. Be flexible and always serve the music first. Okay, next is go to gigs. So when you're first starting out, you probably go to a lot of gigs, right? You want to go and watch musicians who are more experienced than you, who've been playing longer than you, to feel inspired and motivated, and also just for the amazing experience of watching live music. Now, a common trap can be when you start gigging yourself that you don't go to any gigs anymore. But I think it's really important to still go to gigs for a few reasons. First, it's great to just support the scene. We're all in this together. By you going and supporting gigs and, bringing along some friends, that helps those musicians, and then they'll bring people back to your gigs one day or hopefully soon. And, it helps the whole ecosystem of music go around. Second, it's just awesome to watch live music, and you might learn something from that you can then apply to your music. You might go, wow, I didn't know that you could play a groove on a music stand. That's kind of cool. It could be anything really, or that feel was amazing. And then afterwards you can say, how do you do that? Or it could just be, wow, that performance was just so immaculate that now I'm feeling inspired and want to go practice. And thirdly, a byproduct of going to gigs is you're just showing your face and being around in the community. And often this can lead to gig opportunities or musical opportunities. So the number of times that I've gone to a gig just to see a band play and really enjoyed it, to then next week get a message from someone in that band or someone who was at the gig saying, hey, are you free for this gig? And I know that there's no way of 100% knowing if it was because I went to that gig, but I can hedge my bets that it's probably pretty likely that because I was around, that person then thought of me when they were like, I need a drummer for this gig. And especially if you're, relocating or you've moved to a new city, the fastest way to get your foot in the door and to get into a scene is just to go to heaps of gigs and meet lots of people. Okay, number 7 is remove friction to practice. So this was a game changer for me. So, when I lived at home, I used to have one drum kit. So when I had a gig, I would pack down the drum kit from my practice room, take it to the gig, set it up, then play the gig, pack down the drum kit, take it home, and then I'd have to set the drum kit up again in order to be able to practice the next day. And often, when you come home from a gig, you're pretty tired, you might just go, oh, look, I'll set it up tomorrow. And then the next day, when you go to practice, you're like, oh, my drums are all in bags, the hardware's in the hardware case. You know what, I just can't be bothered. And that's because there's so much friction to practice. You have to spend 10 to 20 minutes, depending how long it takes to set up your drums, setting up this drum kit before you can even start practicing. So there's already this upfront friction. So the more that we can remove the friction, the more likely it is that we will want to practice. So I would highly recommend, if you are gigging, it might just be an idea. If you know someone or you could buy one online, just buy a cheap secondhand drum kit and permanently set that up in your practice room and have your gigging kit in bags. So I have a storage room and I have, 2 drum kits in there, one for sort of bigger, larger festival gigs and one for, pretty much most gigs. But this just means that this drum kit here is always set up. So I always have that to practice on and I don't have to ever shift anything or move anything. I can just walk into the room, sit down and start practicing. So then you've also got the sort of mental side of things, which is what am I going to practice? What to practice or where should I start? So this is where a practice journal could come in really handy. I did a video on a practice journal and how I approached that. I'll link it up here. But, if you have a practice journal and you already have what you're working on, at what BPMs and what concepts you're working on, then you can sit down at your already set up drum kit, open your practice journal and go, all right, I've got to practice A, B, and C, close the book and just get into it. And so the more you can reduce the friction, the more likely you are going to practice. And also the more you'll get out of your practice time because you won't be wasting time making decisions, setting things up, and all the rest of it. So reduce friction to practice. All right, next is the concept of many repetitions. So the common mistake here is that when we're practicing something in the practice room, we learn it once and then we go, great, moving on. But there's a big difference between being able to play something once and then mastering a beat or feel or whatever you're learning. And I think we underestimate sometimes how many repetitions that actually is. So I often tell my students, if you can play something 10 times in a row without making a mistake, that's a pretty good guide to then go on to the next idea. There's obviously levels to this and you can take things as far as you want. There's also a point at which there's diminishing returns, where if you play something 999 times out of 1,000, that's a pretty good consistency rate. Are you going to keep spending time working on that, or are you going to now shift your practice to work on something that's less familiar? So when you're practicing something for the first time, you want to break it down into small chunks, play it very, very slowly, and make sure that all of your limbs are lining up and that you're playing the beat correctly. And it doesn't matter how slow it is, because you could literally walk through rock beat 1 going hi-hat and kick, hi-hat, hands together, hi-hat. It's obviously a bit of patience there as well, but also it's just the focus of, can I aim for getting this thing right versus playing this thing fast or, playing it in its final form as such. And on a gig, a simple idea executed extremely well is always going to sound better than a complex idea that isn't executed very well. So practice slowly, do many repetitions, and don't underestimate the power of volume when you're practicing a new skill, feel, or idea. Next, we have find like-minded, motivated people. So this is a huge one for me, and I found this super beneficial. I have a friend, Jayden Blockley, you should check out his channel. Great player, great guy. Every month, we hop on a phone call, just a FaceTime, and we chat for 30 minutes to 2 hours sometimes. And we just chat about what we've been working on, any videos that we're writing, how practice is going, any gigs, or just music or life in general. And it's so great to have that accountability call, gives you that extra little push, but also just have another person that's creative to bounce ideas off and say, what do you think about this? It really, really helps. And also then you inspire each other and motivate each other. All the time I walk away from that call and just go, yep, cool. All right, I've got to get on with things, and feel motivated to practice and, write more YouTube content. So I'd highly recommend, if you have anyone in your band, or it could be another musician friend, just say, hey, you want to be accountability buddies? And it could just be a coffee every now and then. It could be a weekly catch up. It could just be a text every day saying, how'd your practice go? And just having these small measures in place, again, it helps when motivation or inspiration is down to just give you that extra push to practice or get stuck into whatever your goals are. Next, we have record your gigs. This has got to be one of the biggest mind-blown game changers for me because, well, first of all, it's great to record your gigs, mainly for, listening back. You can find things that you want to work on, and it's great to just get a zoomed out third-person listening point of view for your playing. I think it's easy to, get really stuck or caught up in our own heads and think, oh, that feel was horrible. Oh, everyone's thinking I'm bad. Whatever negative thoughts they are. And in reality, most likely people are not thinking that. People have bought a ticket or attended because they want to get an experience and they want to feel the emotion and the excitement and the connection that musical language does for us. And so recording your gigs, I found, has been super helpful for me to sit in the listener's position and say, well, what's the audience experiencing? And there's been so many times where I've been mid-solo and I've had an idea in my head and I have played and it hasn't quite come out the way that I was, intending it to. And I've just thought, oh, that'll sound like a flub or whatever. But what I've found is when I listen back to a gig where this moment like that happens, it often doesn't sound like how it sounded when it came out. And it sounds like I just meant to do that idea. And there's no possible way that the audience is going to know what feel you tried to play or what solo idea you tried to play. And sometimes it's almost exciting when something doesn't quite come off cleanly, because as a listener, I've been to gigs where someone's gone for something and let's say it's just a bunch of really fast notes on the kick drum, Let's say what comes out is on the kick. As the listener, you're going on a journey with the musician and you're listening to this small story that they're telling you through the language of music. And you can fill in the blanks. And sometimes the moment isn't that they played those crazy fast single strokes on the kick drum. It's the fact that they actually went for something that was maybe slightly beyond their technical capacity in that moment. And that in itself is really cool because the solo that they were playing drove them to arrive at this idea that was pushing the boundaries of their playing. And so it's not about, oh, did that come off cleanly or not? It's actually, wow, the fact that they had the idea to go for that is the cool moment. So record your gigs and listen back. And the last point on this list is get a teacher. If you are self-taught, that is awesome. And it's great that you've taken up this journey to learn the drums. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to get a teacher. But it is really beneficial having someone externally who is more experienced than you are to point things along the way that could save you a lot of time or just open up new pathways in drumming. So being self-taught has many benefits. I think sometimes as well, if you go too far down the theory side, it is easy to go more into that analytical playing. And I definitely found myself being down that path. I was very structured, rigid, always did lots of exercises and worked on my technique. And remember, as I was saying, it's sometimes easy to not apply what you're learning when you're just doing only exercises and technique practice. So that can be a thing too. And then often self-taught drummers, you may be more creative because you're on a journey by yourself. You go, oh, what if I try this? What if I try this? And that's what we're talking about with the applying what you practice. But then there's also some potential things with that you may miss a crucial part of technique. And, we want to avoid bad technique or, any injuries and things like that. Or there might be a habit that you've developed that you always play this thing when you do that you might not be able to hear yourself in your playing. The other thing as well is sometimes it is easy to have a lack of direction if you don't have a teacher because you're kind of like, okay, I've learned these things that I've, found online or from resources, but then you're not sure where to go next. And that's where having a teacher can be really beneficial to sort of say, that's awesome that you've learnt these. This is the next step. So there's plenty of options for this. There's probably drummers in your area or local that you can do in-person lessons with. You've got online courses, you've got online coaching. There'll be music schools that will have teachers or, maybe material that you can work through. And then you've obviously got university and, musical institutes as well. And you don't necessarily have to get weekly lessons. You can just get 1 or 2 lessons with someone and say, hey, I'm self-taught or I've never had a teacher before. Can I just play for you? And you just give me some feedback. And, there might be some wisdom there that's going to really help you push to that next level by just getting 1 or 2 sessions with someone. So I'd highly recommend getting a teacher as well as all the other things we've discussed. So there are 11 principles I found have really, really helped me with my drumming journey over the last 20 years. Let me know in the comments any drum advice that you have. I'd love to know and it'd be great to share it with everyone here. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it and I'll see you in the next video.